So we might start. So hello everybody. Hello for all of those that are online. It seems that around 300 were with us yesterday. So I don't know how many of you are with us now, but please, yes, welcome. So I want to tell you as a small intro, I will try to make it small, which is not my strength. To give you an idea of why this discussion this morning with Leontine and Carole that are here online. Leontine Petit, Lemming Films, Carole Scotta, Haut, Holland, and Germany, and France. So 10 years ago, we started to make it a rule for us that we would never continue to work with only one tutor with a group of writers when we had workshops. We started to discover that if we wanted to leave the freedom that was necessary to each writer during the development process, and if we wanted the exchange to be as rich as possible, as much opening windows in the writer's brain as possible, having a pair of tutors, a pair of script consultants was absolutely a key thing to avoid the master, So when we started with that, it started also with the difficulty of how do you associate brains so that it doesn't end up with a bloody fight. How do you put together pairs of interesting tutors that for us are all professional screenwriters? How do you put them in the room without wanting them to say the same thing, because that's pointless, in order that contradiction can be an enrichment, in order that it generates a constant dialectical process. And so we started to really look very carefully at the background of each of the new script consultants that we were trying to work with. And so we discovered that in the field of screenwriting, it's interesting how diverse the backgrounds are. And so some of them coming from a very intense passion for psychoanalysis. Others, I don't know, Gilles Torrent, a fantastic screenwriter in France, being a psychiatrist for many years. And then you have people that come from a scientific background with a constant reference to physics or mathematics when they work with writers. So drawing curves and which works with certain writers, and for others which hated mathematics at school, they run away from the room. And then you have mixing people with an intense passion for compared mythology, working together with people that consider that thermodynamics in physics is a fantastic tool to try to understand the heat emotion that has to be generated for the story, and so on. So we ended up, Charlotte, myself, and the people in the team that are dealing with that and trying to find the idea of who would fit with who. We ended up, because we debrief constantly with the tutors nearly every day to try to see how, because they dance with the writers, and we had to find a way to elaborate a coherence in terms of the music they dance on. We use that metaphor. And we found ourselves for quite a few years with this fascination discovery. Every single session was a new amazement for us, which was, my God, look at this, how psychoanalysis and mathematics combined are amazingly complementary. And so on, with all the disciplines that were, all the fields of human knowledge that were mixing. And so we first, for a few years, we were just, amazed by how dialectics was very fascinating in our case for writers. But with time, we were like, okay, we are fascinated, but we are only like 3 people dealing with that every week, and that is something that has to be shared. If we want to get rid of the systematic reference to American script guru books as the only theoretical reference for script development and story for film, if we want to get rid of that industrial tool, which is interesting but not, cannot pretend to be everything, we then started to realize that we needed to create something that was completely in the open, which is the reason why from within LIM, we decided to create an official European think tank, which is called the StoryTANK, that some of you have already taken a look at. And so the idea of the StoryTANK, so we are now, we will be at the end of the month closing the 3rd season of the StoryTANK, which is a place that puts writers, storytellers, story specialists working hand in hand around the same table, discussing, digging, trying to understand more how it works with researchers from the field of neuroscience, cognitive science, philosophy, phenomenology, psychiatry, physics, whatever. We even had a researcher researching on time in mathematics. It was amazing what it brought. The idea was to put every field of knowledge that can, even only metaphorically, be useful for us when we develop stories, which is, of course, as you all know, not an easy, both fascinating, but it can be very complex. And we can drown in that process. So how can we find the right metaphors to avoid to drown? But that you can take a look at this online. So we've been creating this hand in hand with all the partners of LIM, media, and all the countries that are with us, and we now feel that what is created is heading in a very interesting direction, but there's one thing missing. It's that we are only working, putting around the table writers, professional writers, storytellers, and researchers, and there's also filmmakers, directors that are writers and directors. So they come also with the creation of images put this in the loop. But there's one part missing in this team of generation of meaning through stories. It's the producers. We have never connected that with this research with producers, which is why we felt a great need to connect all these researchers, or at least friction between storytelling and research. We want to connect this with producers to see how it can create a common language, because of course producers are those that are handling the creation of meaning, the delivering of the meaning to the outside world, and they work hand in hand with writers from often very early on in the process. So this morning, the idea was to try a first experience of brainstorming with 2 great producers for an hour and a half, so that we can continue that, spread that discussion with all of you during the day and further on. So the idea is really we don't know what it can generate, but we want to break the comfort of our little bubble. We had to start it from somewhere, so it was writers and researchers. Now we want to open it up, and for also reasons that become political that we will discuss about during our discussion with Carole and Leontine. And in order to do that, we felt like starting with probably the most fascinating and difficult part of the, you know, what comes out of our exchanges with researchers, which is the creation of meaning, and which is the core subject of what we are dealing with sociologists, anthropologists, and even people in cognitive science. So that is going to be the subject of this morning, because of course we cannot bring on the table everything. And this seems to be for us in this troubled world, it seems to be a great starting point to see how to collaborate. So in order to start the discussion, we're going to have an intro with an extract of a discussion we had with Nancy Huston. We start with that, and then step by step, I will tell you what are the little extracts of StoryTANK that we will show you as a preparation for the discussion with Leontine and Carole. So Nancy, as you probably know, she's an amazing writer coming from Canada, living in France now. She's one of the most amazing novel writer in the world, and she's also amazing in her work as an anthropologist. So here is her take on storytelling.
Nous sommes des récits ambulants. Le récit fait partie de notre ADN. Je pense qu'on peut le dire presque scientifiquement. Ça fait partie de notre ADN. C'est devenu une sorte de cliché, cette expression. Mais l'espèce humaine, parmi les primates supérieurs, est l'espèce la plus faible. On connaît ça assez bien maintenant parce que notre cerveau grandissait, parce que les accouchements devenaient de plus en plus difficiles avec cette énorme tête qu'on avait et l'étroitesse des bassins féminins dû au fait de l'ambulation sur deux pattes. Eh bien, tout ça a fait qu'on a commencé à naître de plus en plus prématurés. Nous naissons prématurés, les êtres humains. Et nous naissons fragiles. Nous sommes beaucoup plus fragiles que les autres primates pour plein de raisons. On n'a pas la même dentition, on n'a pas des griffes, on n'a pas beaucoup de poils pour nous protéger du froid. On est nu, en fait, avant de s'habiller. On est nu et on est extrêmement fragile. Ça veut dire qu'il y a beaucoup de prédateurs qui peuvent nous attaquer et dont on peut être la proie, la victime. Cela veut dire que nous avons besoin de nous associer. Alors, comment on fait s'associer les êtres humains pour former des groupes qui peuvent se protéger mieux que des êtres humains éparpillés? Bien sûr, les autres primates sont des créatures sociales aussi. Ils forment des groupes, ils ont des ensembles, on le sait bien, avec le mâle alpha, etc., avec une hiérarchie. Mais nous sommes les seuls à consolider ces groupes par des récits. Et on n'a jamais rencontré une tribu, un groupement humain dans quelque continent que ce soit, qui se balade dans la nature à la manière des animaux en simplement prenant le réel pour ce qu'il est, en se nourrissant, en copulant, en se reproduisant, mais sans parler. Et quand on dit parler, on est tout de suite dans raconter. Qu'est-ce qu'on raconte? Ben, la généalogie, c'est une chose importante. C'est dire on est le fils d'eux ou la fille d'eux, que notre père a fait ci, etc. Ça crée déjà un premier récit, ça nous lie aux générations antérieures. C'est aussi dire nous. En fait, avant même de dire je, on dit nous, les êtres humains. On le voit d'ailleurs chez les gens sans écriture, que l'identité du groupe est beaucoup plus importante que l'identité de l'individu. Et l'individu ne se situe que par rapport au groupe dont il fait partie. Et ensuite, ça a à voir avec la mortalité, avec le temps. En fait, nous sommes, grâce à notre cerveau, il y a cette interaction entre le cerveau et le monde depuis les millénaires, les millions d'années que l'espèce humaine existe. Nous sommes la seule espèce à être vraiment conscients de notre mortalité à l'avance. Bien sûr, toutes les espèces ont peur de mourir et ont l'instinct de survie. Même un ver de terre va essayer de s'échapper si on commence à l'écraser, bien sûr. Mais nous sommes les seuls à savoir d'avance, à réfléchir au fait que nous allons mourir. Cela fait que, entre notre naissance et notre mort, la vie prend la forme d'un récit. Il y a un début, des vicissitudes et une fin. Ensuite, on va dire, en fait, c'était pas ça le début, j'existais dans une autre vie avant, ou en fait, c'est pas vraiment la fin, je vais exister dans une autre dimension, je vais revenir, je vais être réincarné. On a toutes sortes de salades, de fables qu'on peut se raconter pour dire c'est pas vraiment comme ça, mais en tout cas, nous sommes dans la temporalité. Les autres animaux ne le sont pas. C'est très, très, très important, ça. Les singes, aussi intelligents soient-ils, aussi doués soient-ils pour manipuler des signes linguistiques, ne disent jamais « bon, on se retrouve demain au même endroit, à la même heure ». Ils sont incapables de dire ça. Ils tiennent compte du fait que le soleil se lève et se couche, etc. Mais ils ne comptent pas les jours, ils ne sont pas dans le calcul de l'année et la perception consciente du temps. Ensuite, ce que nous passons notre temps involontairement, inconsciemment et irrésistiblement à attribuer un sens à tout. En fait, on peut dire que l'espèce humaine, c'est l'espèce paranoïaque. C'est ça la parano, chacun sait, c'est la surinterprétation. Nous sommes dans la surinterprétation. En fait, le monde tel quel ne signifie rien. Il est là. C'est nous qui injectons du sens à tout. Et parce que nous injectons du sens, ça nous aide à survivre. Le sens, c'est le grand, grand sens, c'est nous sommes supérieurs. Nous méritons. C'est naître, c'est mériter de naître. Nous avons été mis là pour une raison. Nous avons une destinée haute et glorieuse. Ça, c'est vraiment le récit de base de tout groupement humain. Chaque groupement va va dire au départ, nous sommes les humains. Nous, c'est l'homme. Et ensuite, il y a les barbares, ensuite, il y a les envahisseurs, ensuite, il y a les ennemis extraterrestres, ensuite, il y a les robots qui vont nous attaquer. Mais c'est être, dans le récit, c'est être prêt à être attaqué. On peut dire ça. Au départ, le récit est inventé pour nous protéger.
So, that was a first step into, through, of course, from a very helicopter point of view, the anthropological point of view, on the creation of meaning for humans seen from an anthropological point of view. Now we propose a second insight with one of the researchers that we've been working with from Sweden in a story tank. He is a sociologist, which job is to, so we go more into filmmaking here now. His job is to interview viewers when they come out of a movie to see what is it what has been impacting them and what is the meaning, again, that they are creating from it. So here we go. Tomas Axelsson.
I managed to contribute with new insights of what is going on in the viewer. Because here we have, there's a lot of writing of film, how film gives an input to the viewer, and the viewer creates meaning. What I did, it was two things, because I combined and separated between basic emotions and which could be called affects, joy, curiosity, fear, disgust, and more of that. And also cognitions, high cognition, when you combine basic feelings with thinking about this, giving them direction and content, something happens which is specific for storytelling, that you actually are emotionally and with your affect, you're engaged. But also it deals with something. a conflict or a dilemma or something like that. And then you have this emotional evaluation where you as a viewer, and this is an interesting, when every viewer is creating a story or a fabula, and every scriptwriter has a fabula and story to tell, but there is not 100% match between the story that the scriptwriter or the director wants to tell and the viewer. The viewer is free to construct his or her own fabula, which I think is extremely important, the freedom of creating the fabula. And then I could, through this and other examples, see that some people, they were engaged in actually understanding the story in a basic way. But the most interesting thing was when people were sitting in the movie, contemplating, enjoying the films. Sometimes, and quite often, they made this jump from the screen, from the story, to their real life. The interplay between story and their own lives. And then I could see that when that happened, not always, maybe quite rare, but still, sometimes, when that happens, people are dealing with very personal things, dreams, what they want to fulfill in life, conflicts they have, also what I mentioned, the self-image negotiations, who am I, which is the person I want to be, moral critique of society and the development in the world, also spiritual reflections. In some rare instances, I could also see that people touched upon transcendental experiences, and all combined in this expression of thick viewing. Very much is going on, extremely much is going on, and both film scholars and scriptwriters and people in the film business should know that the audience is actually extremely active, extremely full of thinking and feelings, and they put this, they project this on the screen, filling it with meaning, with new meaning, which could be summarized by idiosyncratic interpretations, personal interpretations. Mm-hmm. We are meaning-making animals. We create symbols, and we have this transitional space between our deep inner reality and our real concrete reality. And it is the symbolic realm, where we have the symbols, where religion were created years back and centuries, and now we have the culture sector, the films, the theater, and everything, and that we can move into this transitional space and play with our inner reality related to the outer reality through this in-between, where the films actually are taking place for us. And that's why we can sit for 2 hours and we move into that. It's a threshold. We move into it, and then we go back.
I think Tomas has an example with Pulp Fiction.
Exactly.
With a viewer.
That's very fascinating. The woman I interviewed about her favorite movie was Pulp Fiction, and this key scene that she picked was a focus on the main character, Bruce Willis, when he's standing on the doorsteps. And he is hesitating because he can't take a step out to his own freedom in the shop. It's a scene where he and the Marcellus Wallace, the mafia guy, is beaten up in the cellar, and he's tortured by 2 white police, his enemy actually. So he's standing there wanting to leave, but then he hears the screams of the Marcellus Wallace, and instead of climbing out in freedom, he goes back and saves his enemy. And he kills these police. And when the camera is actually focusing on his face, my interviewee, she tells me, now you can see how he thinks. It's his consciousness that thinks. And then she describes what Bruce Willis' character thinks. But it's just a silent, no, it's not a silent clip, but it's his face and some music. And she project on the screen what he thinks. And he actually states it. he thinks that, no, what should I do? Should I get out? No, hell not. I will get down and give them bastards. Now I will show them hell. So she articulates in her view when she's sitting watching the film exactly what Bruce Willis is thinking. And it's also an interesting misperception because she believes that the camera is zooming in on his face, but it's actually not a zoom.
As if you could watch what is happening within the brain.
No, not really that, but she perceives that you can see how the camera zooms. I mean, she's so engaged in this moment.
She's zooming.
She's zooming.
She's the one zooming.
But the camera is not zooming, because I was going back to the scene. No, the camera is on the same distance all the time.
It's very interesting for directors, because what you say is that if somebody is very engaged in the moral dilemma or question of the character, you don't need to zoom in.
Exactly.
The viewer is already doing it.
The viewers,
so
exactly.
You shouldn't push it too much. Sometimes you just need to leave space for the viewer to make the work.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's interesting because when she really loves that character, talking about empathy. He has killed people before, but now he shows that he has a moral sentiment, that he cannot leave the tortured guy in the basement. He must go back because he has a moral code. Yeah. And she talks about that moral code. And when she realizes that Bruce Willis' character has this moral code, she really loves him. And it enhances her engagement in the character, that he actually go back and help this guy instead of taking the egoistic way out to freedom. She's doing the projection. It's an interesting way when someone is projecting the film. But the viewer is also engaged in the projection of thoughts into the film. So it's a double projection going on from the camera, projector, and from the viewer to the same screen.
Okay, so we, for this intro, we took a look at the anthropological point of view, looking at humans in front of the creation of meaning. Then looking at the spectator, a film with Tomas, and from that we have been generating tools that some of you writers have seen already, trying to understand the process for a writer during the writing process. How does this operate? What can be considered, how to put into a scheme, this has been a big question for us for many years, how to put into a scheme the creation of meaning as a result of a narrative shape, of a narrative effort, as a result of the struggle of what humans, of what the characters are pushed into during the film. And so before discussing with Leontine and Carole, I want to show you very quickly the kind of drawing that can be considered a way to look at what is happening in the process of generated by the writers when they work. So this is the beginning. So time is going this way, this is the end of the film. And here is, let's say, either the protagonist or the group of protagonists that you're playing with. And here is those that oppose that, okay? So you have, on the group of the protagonists, let's say this is the dynamic throughout the film, and these are the forces that oppose it, right? So, protagonist, and forces against. Every scheme is an attempt to simplify, clarify. So of course, it's a simplification, but it's interesting to look at it this way. So here we can consider that the story is, if we look only at the narrative side for the writer when he is working or she is working, it's going this way, which is, it's like a boxing ring that we are trying to reinforce all the way. And so, the black thing here, what I draw in black, is the narrative creation that we all have to do when we are working on a script. But that narrative effort is not in itself the creation of substance. It's just the creation of energy, the creation of momentum, the creation of the engine of the story in terms of emotions, but it's not the substance in itself, the substance of what we call the meaning. And so, in a way, we can consider for the writer, when the writer is working, that we are constantly trying to understand to what fundamental question we are trying to answer. And throughout the film, the different moments of struggle are going to be attempts at answering that initial question posed by, let's say, the trouble created. And here, of course, in an ideal world where the writer would guide the creation of meaning completely, the result would be like this. We have a question, we generate an answer. Of course, it's much more complicated than that. And we generate the fact that it's going like this. The meaning in itself, there's not a lot of meaning throughout the film because it's just, provisory. Like it's not. The big moment of the creation of meaning comes throughout when we arrive, when we come into what we call the thematical scenes, which is towards the end. The meaning is spreading into a field of possible either questions or attempt at answering to the initial question. And so what is interesting here is that what Tomas is telling us is that if the red thing is the creation of meaning which the writer is battling with, trying to generate consciously or not completely consciously throughout the writing process, what Tomas is telling us is that there's another part which is the added meaning that the viewer is generating, is adding to the meaning that the writer is generating. And so we can then go further into generating the fact that it can be done step by step, in parts, first part of the film generating a landing space in terms of meaning, and the second part of the meaning makes us think the meaning maybe is more this and that. And then towards the end, after the different parts of the movie, the different chapters, voluntarily not making it a 3-act structure. It can be whatever number of acts. But what is interesting is that there's the landing space and the appropriation in terms of meaning by both the filmmaking process, the editing, distribution, and then appropriation by the audience is generating a machine to spread a field of meaning which in a way escapes the hands of the filmmaker. But of course, the more the filmmaker is kind of controlling, because if you're completely obsessively anti-fascist, and if your film ends up making viewers feel that maybe isn't that a far right kind of idea that comes out of it, you're in trouble. If your creation comes, really reaches a completely another area of meaning than what you wanted. So here is the kind of debate that we can have when we are in a writing room with writers, trying to see how we guide the body and the physiology of the story in order to create meaning. But now, of course, there can be other drawings, and we could spend 2 days continuing to dig into that. But my question is, with both of you, Leontine and Carole. You as a producer, how is it that you work with this creation of meaning? How is it that you capture it? However difficult it is, we all know it is difficult, and sometimes you have weird discoveries on the way. But how do you tackle that? Leontine?
Yes, I'm there. Do you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you perfectly well. So, oh, sorry. First of all, maybe not everybody knows both of you. So if you can maybe introduce yourself shortly so that everybody in the room knows who you are.
Okay, so maybe I start. So I'm Leontine Petit, and my company is called Lemming Film. And I founded the company 26 years ago in Amsterdam. And nowadays we also have offices in Belgium and Germany. These companies are smaller than the one in Amsterdam. So we mainly produce most of our feature films and drama series out of Amsterdam. And we are sort of, you could say, sort of like specialized in international co-production. So from the beginning on, we always tried not only make films and drama series from our national, from Holland, but also to cooperate a lot abroad. So basically our slate is quite eclectic. That means that on the one hand, we made films for very, very small children, where we were also looking about, if you talk about meaning, I think you can also find meaning in these kind of films. And on the other hand, we produce like the films that probably the group will know more is like, we were the co-producer on The Lobster or Monos by Alejandro Alandes, or a film by Lucrezia Martel from Argentina. So we do a lot of different kind of projects. And so your question was, how do we work with meaning, or how do we search for meaning? I think so. That's what I was already saying in the beginning. I think meaning is something which is, you could in a way say, the core of why we started to produce. Because for us, it was extremely important that stories had somehow a meaning. Of course, there are people that really like to purely entertain, and I think that's completely okay. And I think even in films that want to purely entertain, there is a form of meaning. But I think why we like to produce is because we think it's the combination of entertainment and meaning. So we still like to reach a certain audience, but we believe that an audience, that this audience also can have a meaning. So that's also another thing which is very important for us. We are very strong believers of Europe and of European culture. So I think a lot of the stories that we pick up are somehow related to European culture, or are a connection between European culture and other cultures. It's quite a broad question. So I'm just also looking a little bit for.
Yeah, one of the key questions here is also how do you work on this creation of meaning alongside with the writer and director? How is this? Do you consider it's there in the brain of the writer from the start, or how do you sculpt this with him or her?
And I mean, I think no, I don't think it's like a bubble where the writer is in, and then we just say, okay, we come along, and then we just try to finance it. I think it's in our case, it's very much a process. I mean, I was thinking about a film that we were only the minority co-producers on. It's a film that was just released called Pleasure. But we talked a lot about meaning when we met Ninja Teiberg. I don't know if people know the film Pleasure. It was just released in several countries in Europe, and it was premiered in Sundance. And it's a film about a young girl that wants to make it as a star in the porn industry in LA. And when we met Nina and Ninja Teiberg, we had a lot of discussion. Okay, how can you make a film around this subject which is more than just like being a voyeur. What does she want to tell about the story? Why does this story has to be told? Is this because she was very clear that from the beginning, I don't want to tell a story about a very how do you say that, like a drug addict that goes there just to earn more money, and it's or somebody who's abused. She really wanted to tell something about the powers within the industry and what these powers also tell about the way men and women work together, and the way people look towards the whole issue of porn. So this, for example, when we first talked to her, we were just together with her all the time, looking within the story to really see how these themes that she wanted to come across would be translated into scenes. Because one thing is, of course, about having a theme, and she was not only a filmmaker, but also she did gender studies and all these kind of things. So she was really also somebody who really investigated the whole issue of gender and power within this society. So it was a lot about, how do we structure these scenes and the story in such a way that in the end the viewer would understand the meaning and the themes that she wanted to come across. And of course, it's a very delicate process. So from the beginning, when we picked up the project and we worked together with Erik Hemmersdorf, who is a fantastic producer. He's the producer of Ruben Östlund, so the director of The Square. So we also believed in him as a very important, how do you say that, protector of the right meaning or the interesting meaning in this story. Because again, for example, there were people within Eurimage who didn't even want to read the story because they had such a prejudice against the whole theme. And so I think as a producer, you are there to both in the script and also in the editing, to look together with the filmmaker whether certain scenes, the way you direct your character, the way you make a certain beginning or ending, gives you the opportunity to get these meanings across. And then again, what Tomas is saying, then if the viewer is watching the film, then there will be an enormous amount of new meanings created by the audience. But that's at least a start, what I can say about it.
Okay. Carole, what would you, first of all, give us a bit about you so that everybody knows.
Okay. So hi, everybody. So we are producers and distributors, and we do films and drama series, pretty much like Lemming film in Holland. We are based in Paris, and as distributors, we actually release many films from Europe. We had the chance last year, for example, to be the French distributors of Another Round, the Thomas Winterberg movie. So, I mean, we try to tap into the high-end auteur films. We had the chance also to be co-producers of The Lobster with Lemming. That's how we met, by the way. So we try to, and I would say that we define ourselves as independents in production and in distribution. And what it means really in the discussion that we're having is that we will focus mainly on different voices, different voices from all over. So it means that it has a very important relationship to the meaning, because as independent, we will not go into the mainstream ideas or genre or writers or directors, but we will always try, and that's really because we like to do that and we believe in it, we will always try to help new voices to express their stories. So I think it's very important. And I guess, I mean, you have to, in a way, match the stories that you want to tell. I guess there is a relationship that is very organic between what you want to put on screen and who you are. And I guess it has to, it's obvious for writers and directors, but I think it's also very true for producers. And I think it was very interesting that Groupe Ouest and Antoine, you invited producers because we are very connected to the stories. And I think we are even sometimes at the beginning of the story when we decide to, for example, option a book, and that we will look for writers and directors to adapt it. So I think, the subject is very connected in the triangle, which is very meaningful and important and essential, which is writer, director, and producer. And it can include a broadcaster or platform if we are talking of a series, of course, but that's the very core of where the story starts. And to quote someone from Holland, actually, I would like to quote Rutger Bregner. I don't know if some of you know him. He's a writer. He wrote 2 books which really changed my way of looking at things. One is called in France Les Utopies Réalistes. So I'm sorry, I didn't do I guess it's Utopias for Realism or something like that. And the second one is called Humanities. And I think he's pointing something which is a challenge for us as storytellers. He's pointing that the stories that we like to tell to each other from the beginning of Humanities are always stories where the conflict is put up front. The conflict is a very good, as we all know, helps newspapers to sell more. I mean, conflict, and I would say bad news are, as we all know, sell much more than nice stories. And it has actually a very nice, interesting story within the second book, which is the story of Lord of the Flies. I think that's the international title, where he digged into the story, because as you know, the story of Lord of the Flies is a bunch of boys were lost in the sea and ended up on a deserted island. And the story tells the story of these boys fighting against each other, killing each other. I mean, like a very somber and dark story. But the real story, and he did he's a historian, by the way. So all what he writes is based on research and documentation. And he did a very interesting research about the story. And he ended up with the real story from one of the boys who was an old man when he could talk with him, was actually the story. What happened was very nice story. Actually, the boys ended in this island, but created a kind of ideal society where there was no hierarchy. Power was really equally shared between them. And it was great, actually, and they survived very easily. But that story is not so interesting to tell, of course, and the story that was told is much more interesting. So, as we all know, we need conflict in stories. And I think as producers and writers and directors, our challenge is to create interest without going into the facility, which would be to change stories into dark stories. But on the contrary, we cannot tell stories that are too nice and too good to tell. So I think we need to find a way to tell a story that can be interesting, but not, how could I say that, not looking for the bad aspects of human beings and trying to elevate people when they are watching our films, our series. And when you mentioned Leontine animation, I think in Europe we have a very big challenge as well, but we have great filmmakers, writers, animators in animation, and I think it starts with kids, of course. And if we can get rid of the traditional stories that were told by Disney, and I know that they changed a lot their way of looking at stories, but I think in animation we have lots of talents which tell different stories, which are much more interesting, much more have a new way of looking at the world, and I think it's also very interesting to be to invest ourselves in this kind of stories, because I think they are very meaningful for lots of audiences. So so I think I mean, it's a discussion, of course, and I would be happy to. But I think as producers and writer-directors, we need to navigate between those two ways of telling story and find a way which might be European, I don't know if we have to name it, or might come from other parts of the world, Africa, Asia, I don't know, but really to try to be more subtle than good and right, right and wrong, and having those forces that always go by pairs. And I guess there are other ways to tell stories which can be more interesting, I would say.
Leontine, you want to add to that?
No, I was thinking, I think in that sense, we as producers are, and I completely agree with Carole about this being independent. And that's also why we like to work with each other, because I think that there's a big difference between producers that are, at the moment at least, most producers who are not independent, who are part of a bigger group, big media group or something like that. Their first goal, I mean, I think they're all, as an individual, they also want to make a beautiful projects, but their first goal of a big media group is to earn more money for the shareholders. And that's, I think, a huge difference between being independent and being not independent, is that for us, that's not the main goal. I mean, money is a goal to make beautiful things, but not as a goal by itself. And I think that this whole independence has also to do with, trying to define different voices, trying to tap into the different themes that live in society. It's a lot about diversity in that sense, and about not a monoculture, but like a culture where you can still hear all these different voices, and that we can have this this discourse with each other, this endless different meanings and different opinions that somehow in this system will keep alive this whole storytelling. Because if Nancy Huston, for example, talks about storytelling is for protection, then I think this protection is also part of the fact that we hear each other, that we don't say there's only one person that tells us the truth and we all follow this person, but we allow ourselves and to hear all these different voices and to listen to them, and to also have the time to really listen and to give ourselves the time to listen. And I think that will be, in the end, then we really protect ourselves in a way. And we don't protect ourselves by having a monoculture, because then there will always be people who will be extremely disappointed, and then a bigger conflict, then not the nice conflict that we need in our stories will somehow pop up, but it will cause for a really bad conflict. So I think we as producers, if we work in such a way with the directors and the writers, we try to not only facilitate, but to, if you see yourself as a producer, as that's often a metaphor that is used as a midwife, or a midman, we're not all women, is that together with the writer-director, you try to make such a situation in which you together deliver this new story, and that means also you want to deliver it in a healthy way, you want to deliver it in the end in a happy way, and things like that. And I think it's extremely important that the triangle, writer, director, and producer work in such a way that we also understand each other's need to in a way also to protect the meaning, although the meaning is not something, it's not a thing that is just always the same, like what Tomas was saying. The meaning evolves by itself, by time, by by also time in the development, I think. And often it's a story has different meanings and different themes. But we as producers have to also keep the meaning, because it's very easy that if a project goes to the process, that there will people from outside, the commissioning editors from the platforms, or even people from the funds, and they will add their own meaning towards a story, which can be very interesting. Because you can listen to these different opinions about your themes and about your meaning. But somehow we as a group within the triangle, you have to also protect that it doesn't go lost and that it becomes blurry. So that's also another, I think, way you can see a producer.
Just to add to your analogy, and you said it, but with giving birth, I guess to make it fluid and nice, and I think you need time. And I think this development stage is very important, that we are not afraid of losing time, which is never losing time, but it's always taking the time that is needed to make sure that the ideas are really surviving the next day, and things like that. So I think this time thing is very important, and I guess it has to do with how you fund development, how producers are able to pay their writers, so how producers are able to retain rights. So that goes to another political discussion, but that's very important that the producers are strong and wealthy enough to be able to fund that time for development.
I am very tempted to dive into a second part of discussion, which is the fact that some of you have heard of it. It seems that it's not the communication coming from EU has not, made it that in some countries it's been more spoken about than in others. But you've heard maybe about the new European Bauhaus initiative, which has been launched by von der Leyen. It's this idea to prepare for a European Green Deal in a broad sense. They are trying to find ways to help collaborations between, architecture, research, social NGOs, ecology, every field invested in the creation of the future, in pushing us into a livable society, for the next generation. We are now taken into being part of that discussion, and initially it wasn't clear, taking the creators of meaning, audiovisual, film, being part of the creation of a possible future. But now the door is open for the possibility for all of us, and then producers being those who deliver the job and follow the whole process. It's absolutely key for you, I would say, what is it according to you? Because we are, yes, working for entertainment, like you were saying, and in the meantime, taking a position in a political field, the generation of meaning is, in a way, in the broad sense, taking a stand in the political field, in the beautiful sense of politics, right? And so how do you think, of course it's a very broad discussion and we could spend a week discussing about this, but I would be very interested, because it's also a good way to launch the process between us during the breaks and lunches. And how do you think producers and film professionals, is it needed that they do this? And how can they do this? You unite, combine their brains into collaborating in this creation of meaning, helping this trans-sector brainstorming to rethink the future and to pave the way for another, let's say a more humanistic way of building the future, maybe, that even if that is a broad definition. And that is something that we believe, Europe has the possibility of doing in this mad world that we're living in today. So how do you think you, as producers, we are now talking more about the creation of society for tomorrow, the recreation. How do you think it is possible for producers to contribute to this societal debate, which is with urbanists and sociologists and architects and people in new technologies, in field of new energy, etc., etc. It's very broad, and but let's dive into this too big swimming pool.
As you're saying, Antoine, the world has become very complex, and writing is not just about writing and techniques, and it's about being able to understand the world and to make it understandable. So I think everything that, and I was very interested in what you created with the StoryTANK, everything that is helping us as producers to match writers, talents, people from different fields, and making these people communicate, I think is very rich and important. So I don't know in what sense we could use that new Bauhaus scheme to help it, but I think it would be very interesting to, everything that is writing, experiment, school, whatever, should be matched with many people from different worlds. And I told you the other day when we prepared this that I was attending a very interesting festival in France, south of France, last summer, which deals mostly with environment, ecology, and so on. And I was surprised to see that there were no filmmakers attending to this festival. I guess there was one filmmaker who was invited because he did a documentary, but there were very few people from our business. And I was thinking, why? It's so interesting because it also gives us so many other stories, so many other knowledge about our world that I think we should match more, we should mix more with different fields. And we tend to live in our bubbles because we are very busy and we work all the time and we talk about writing and making scripts better. But I think this needs to be nurtured from the outside world. And so I guess, I haven't really digged into this scheme, and we will talk about it between producers. Actually, I think it's interesting, maybe Leontine, just to mention that we are part of a group that we've just created and that we will announce later next week. But because being independent doesn't mean being alone. And so we felt we all value our independence for all the reasons that we mentioned. But we felt, what if we as producers created a group from different countries, different worlds, basically, that would meet on a regular basis, that would maybe develop together, that will look for money for development together. So that's what we created, and we are part of it. We called ourselves the Creatives, by the way, just to insist on the fact that producers can be also creatives. And I think, everything that is really helping us and giving us means, resources to open our brains, I think is very valuable for the stories to tell.
I completely agree, and I think that's something that happens far too little. Exactly what Carole is saying. Producing and filmmaking is so time-consuming that everybody is living in his own bubble. But that's not enough anymore, and maybe it was already not enough for a long time. But I think in a way that if you look from a positive point of view, a lot of the issues that also Bauhaus touches is like talking about inclusivity and sustainability and things like that. They were there already for many, many, many years, but only the last couple of years it became much more on the foreground, and it's also within our industry. For example, you cannot cast without really thinking about making your cast more inclusive, which some people find very irritating, but I really see that also as a very positive side. Sometimes you have to go a little bit to the extreme to come out into the middle, and we all have to be aware of that it's not unbalanced. But I think the whole inclusivity discussion was something that was not really a discussion for so many years, which is crazy because, for example, in Holland, we have a huge society of Moroccan and Turkish people. We have a huge society of people from Suriname and from Curaçao and whatever. So just to say that the whole society in Holland is just white male is just not true. So I think, and then we're not we're only talking now about the different cultures that are living in our society, but we also have people who are disabled or people who have different different genders and sexual preferences. I think all these issues and next to other sustainability and things like that are issues that it's the more you talk about it and the more that it's emphasized, and it's there are discussions in like workshops like your workshop, and also then to combine people from different areas. I think that's a very, very good. Just because I'm living with somebody who's an artist, and so I get in touch a lot with conceptual modern art. And there, for example, you have a group called, I already told Antoine, it's called Forensic Architects. And I think Forensic Architects is already also doing that within art. And we were developing a project with Lucrezia Martel, who's a very big director from Argentina. She explained to me that she was already in contact with, for example, this group of, it's basically a group of artists that through a forensic method, they, in their case, they, how do you say that? They, how do you say that? That they make the you're more aware about all the bad things that happen in certain societies. I can't find the English words for it, but anyway, they are very much also about combining conceptual art with all kind of scientists from different kind of fields. And I think this is something that's one I just want to say again. I think that's a very important thing. And for me also, Antoine, it was quite new that you are doing that. I haven't heard that within all the different workshops that I followed. I've never seen such a combination of creation of storytelling for the audiovisual world, and work together with the scientific world. And I think so. And I really hope that this Bauhaus can also encourage that. And it also starts, I think, with film schools, workshops, and making people aware that it's possible to combine all these different opinions. And it's not that we as storytellers, should live only in our own bubble and not think about all the other input we can get.
And we have a responsibility as storytellers. I mean, because we cannot deny the importance and the influence that films or series can have on people, as we all know. So I think we have this responsibility to be able to talk about the world in its complexity and not in its simplification, which is what we all fight for, I guess, or need to fight for.
If I may say, there's something that linked to that discussion is very exciting today, in a way, despite all the trouble that we are facing, is the fact that until 10 years ago, in a way, whenever in Brussels or in any country there was a trouble, let's find new technologies to take us out. Let's find, new energies. It's always the scientists, the technologists that were the key to get to the next step. And then in the meantime, the more it goes, the more people are like, in the field of ecology, for instance, but in the field of renewing how we live, everybody is saying from every angle, we need to recreate meaning. We need to create new meaning. But then nobody was starting to put the finger on, okay, who is creating the meaning in our society? They were still continuing to create meaning through equations, through concepts, conceptual thinking, which is a problem. And then it's as if, for the European Bauhaus, what is interesting is that they've been discovering a bit late, but now it's there, the fact that, those that are creating meaning on a big scale in front of, an audience, in front of humans, citizens, filmmakers, producers, screenwriters in film or series are probably in today's society one of the key actors for that. If we don't want to go into bloody Facebook, etc. So it means that. It seems that for people that are rethinking these possibilities of future, taking into account the creation of meaning, the professionals, the craftsmen of the creation of meaning that we all are, it starts to be more on the table, which I think was not the case 10 years ago. So that's very interesting.
Even 2 years ago, as Leontine was saying, I think it's the moment to be aware of all this, and the general context is actually pushing us to be more active into that those directions. It's true. It's changed a lot since 2-3 years.
Yeah, but we always see it from the negative point of view, because we're now suddenly very eager to solve it all. But if we take a little bit of time, then we see already a lot of good things happening. And just a simple example. I was this weekend I was invited to do a whiskey tasting in Scotland. I never did that before. But then the guy was, I think 5 years ago that this wouldn't have happened. The guy was talking a lot about his sustainable way of making his whiskey. I mean, I think this was something that he wouldn't be proud of 5 years ago, because it was not such a big theme, or he was not busy with it. And to come back to your storytelling as a way to help the technical people, the people who come with the certain solutions and things like that. I mean, it's already for a long time very clear that art in which kind of form, if there is a meaning in this art, it will easier translate to people than when you only give them some numbers or some. So you have to visualize it. You have to. I think the only thing which is you have to be careful with, that we don't become teachers, or we don't become prophets. So it's prophets. What's the English word?
Of course, yeah.
I think that if the meaning is only the goal for the art, then it can become. It can become only activism, So, but I think meaning in the sense of that it starts a discussion, or it starts certain feelings, or it starts a change. That's I think very interesting. But meaning as just one voice, I think you have to be careful. But I think a lot of good filmmakers are capable of as we saw before, of changing certain things. And so I do understand what the Bauhaus in that sense wants, and we have to make sure that they adjust audiovisual products.
But I would like to add something which I think is also a bit scary somehow. Is you mentioned this guy who makes whiskey, and he's storytelling about what he does and everything. I would like to point out that in our field we are starting to totally forget about the creators. And if you look at the way that series or films are mentioned on TV, on platforms and everything, the name of the directors don't appear, even in the press. I mean, it starts to, and I think we need to also reclaim the stories behind, and who are the creators. And I think it's very important, because on one hand, it's true that we all want to know how wine or whiskey is being made, and we like those stories, and I think it's very. I told Antoine as well that we can compare really, let's say, agriculture and culture, because the way we are both passionate about what we are doing. We want to we want to make people understand what we're doing. So there are very many similarities, I think, and we should also maybe meet more. And create bridges between our worlds. But I would like just to say that we should be fighting to push our creators, and because I think at some point our series or films are just seen as products, and people don't really care anymore about how they are done. And we all used to watch how do you call that, films behind the films and scenes behind the scenes, and look at how cinema is, the place that is reserved in journals or magazines for cinema is smaller and smaller, and we keep hearing our publicists saying that cinema doesn't interest TV anymore. So I think we need also to be aware of that, and I don't know how we can fight that. It's a very strong trend that is pushing cinema away, or at least its art form, and just for product and hours of series. And I think it's very scary, this part of what we are living through.
Okay, so let's let's fight for it.
Yeah.
Okay, so both of you, thank you very much for this start of a discussion. Yeah. We'll continue around a beer and a coffee. And so let's keep in touch, and let's see how producers here and on screen here, how producers can be a bit more part of that cross-disciplinary rethinking that we are trying to generate. Yes, so we would really want to find a way to have a constant door open to you, and how to have that door open in this think tank idea is something that has to be discussed between us. So thank you very much, both of you.
Thank you for inviting us.
Bye.
Work. Bye.
Bye.
So it's just a starting point. It's an ongoing process, and how to work more, how to include the generation of films more than the generation of stories. How to include that next step into the loop of rethinking this creation of meaning, among other things. It is something that we are very open to discuss with you, and we know we're going to have meetings this afternoon, and it's something that has to be discussed also with the partners, the funds. How can we be pushing for strengthening this creation of meaning in today's context? That's something that we should continue to discuss about. So thank you for being here for that launching of an idea.